program on receipt of non-generic prescription maintenance medications under TRICARE Pharmacy Benefits Program. Sector 707. Improvement of postpartum care for members of the armed forces and dependents. Subtitle B Healthcare Administration Sector 711. Modification of certain Defense Health Agency organization requirements. Sector 712. Requirement for consultations relating to military medical research and Defense Health Agency research and development. Sector 713. Authorization of program to prevent fraud and abuse in the military health system. Sector 714. Authority of Secretary of Defense and Secretary of Veterans Affairs to enter into agreements for planning, design, and construction of facilities to be operated as shared medical facilities. Sector 715. Extension of authority for Joint Department of Defense Department of Veterans Affairs Medical Facility Demonstration Fund. Sector 716. Establishment of Department of Defense system to track and record information on vaccine administration. Sector 717. Exemption from required physical examination and mental health assessment for certain members of the reserve components. Sector 718. Authorization of provision of instruction at Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences to certain federal employees. Sector 719. Removal of requirement for 1 year of participation in certain medical and lifestyle incentive programs of the Department of Defense to receive benefits under such programs. Sector 720. Department of Defense standards for exemptions from mandatory COVID-19 vaccines. Sector 721. Establishment of Centers of Excellence for Enhanced Treatment of Ocular Injuries. Sector 722. Implementation of Integrated Product for Management of Population Health across Military Health System. Sector 723. Digital Health Strategy of Department of Defense. Sector 724. Development and update of certain policies relating to military health system and integrated medical operations. Sector 725. Mandatory training on health effects of burn pits. Sector 726. Standardization of definitions used by the Department of Defense for terms related to suicide. Subtitle See Reports and Other Matters. Sector 731. Modifications and reports related to military medical manning and medical billets. Sector 732. Access by United States government employees and their family members to certain facilities of Department of Defense for assessment and treatment of anomalous health conditions. Sector 733. Pilot program on cardiac screening at certain military service academies. Sector 734. Pilot program on assistance for mental health appointment scheduling at military medical treatment facilities. Sector 735. Prohibition on availability of funds for certain research connected to China. Sector 736. Limitation on certain discharges solely on the basis of failure to obey lawful order to receive COVID-19 vaccine. Sector 737. Independent analysis of Department of Defense Comprehensive Autism Care Demonstration Program. Sector 738. Independent review of suicide prevention and response at military installations. Sector 739. Feasibility and advisability study on establishment of Aeromedical Squadron at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. Sector 740. Study on incidence of breast cancer among members of the armed forces serving on active duty. Sector 741. GAO Biennial Study on Individual Longitudinal Exposure Record Program. Sector 742. Controller General Study on Implementation by Department of Defense of recent statutory requirements to reform the military health system. Sector 743. Study to determine need for a joint fund for Federal Electronic Health Record Modernization Office. Sector 744. Briefing on domestic production of critical active pharmaceutical ingredients for national security purposes. Sector 745. Briefing on substance abuse in the armed forces. Title 8 Acquisition Policy, Acquisition Management, and Related Matters. Subtitle A Acquisition Policy and Management. Sector 801. Acquisition Workforce Educational Partnerships. Sector 802. Prohibition on acquisition of personal protective equipment from non-allied foreign nations. Sector 803. Authority to acquire innovative commercial products and commercial services using general solicitation competitive procedures. Sector 804. Modifications to contracts subject to cost or pricing data certification. Sector 805. 2-year extension of selected acquisition report requirement. Sector 806. Annual report on highest and lowest performing acquisition programs of the Department of Defense. Sector 807. Assessment of impediments and incentives to improving the acquisition of commercial products and commercial services. Sector 808. Briefing on transparency for certain domestic procurement waivers. Sector 809. Report on violations of certain domestic preference laws. Subtitle B. Amendments to General Contracting Authorities, Procedures, and Limitations Sector 811. Certain multi-year contracts for acquisition of property, budget justification materials. Sector 812. Extension of demonstration project relating to certain acquisition personnel management policies and procedures. Sector 813. Office of Corrosion Policy and Oversight Employee Training Requirements. Sector 814. Modified condition for prompt contract payment eligibility. Sector 815. Modification to procurement of services, data analysis and requirements validation. Sector 816. Limitation on procurement of welded shipboard anchor and mooring chain for naval vessels. Sector 817. Repeal of preference for fixed-price contracts. Subtitle C. Provisions relating to other transaction authority. Sector 821. Modification of other transaction authority for research projects. Sector 822. Modification of prize authority for advanced technology achievements. Sector 823. Pilot program on systems engineering determinations. Sector 824. Recommendations on the use of other transaction authority. Sector 825. Reporting requirement for certain defense acquisition activities. Subtitle D. Provisions relating to software and technology. Sector 831. Technology protection features activities. Sector 832. Modification of enhanced transfer of technology developed at Department of Defense laboratories. Sector 833. Pilot program on acquisition practices for emerging technologies. Sector 834. Pilot program to accelerate the procurement and fielding of innovative technologies. Sector 835. Independent study on technical debt in software-intensive systems. Sector 836. Cadre of software development and acquisition experts. Subtitle E. Provisions relating to supply chain security. Sector 841. Modernization of acquisition processes to ensure integrity of industrial base. Sector 842. Modification to analyses of certain activities for action to address sourcing and industrial capacity. Sector 843. Assuring integrity of overseas fuel supplies. Sector 844. Assessment of requirements for certain items to address supply chain vulnerabilities. Sector 845. Department of Defense Research and Development Priorities. Sector 846. Report on the Manufacturing Engineering Education Program. Sector 847. Plan and report on reduction of reliance on services, supplies, or materials from covered countries. Sector 848. Prohibition on certain procurements from the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Subtitle F. Industrial Base Matters Sector